Imagine doing everything right for your hair. You've checked your hormones, you've tried oils, shampoos, maybe even supplements, and yet your hair keeps thinning as you age. That's because for many people, the real problem isn't hormones at all. Today, I want to show you the surprising nutrient that quietly shuts down age-related hair loss, and almost no one is talking about it. I'm Dr. Eric Berg, and once you understand this, a lot of hair loss mysteries will suddenly make sense. Here's the big mistake most people make. They assume thinning hair is automatically about testosterone, estrogen, or thyroid hormones. So they chase hormone tests, hormone creams, and hormone balancing supplements. But hair follicles are tiny, high-energy factories. And factories don't run on hormones alone. They run on nutrients. When one critical nutrient drops with age, hair growth slows, the hair shaft becomes thinner, and follicles quietly go into a resting phase. This nutrient is involved in over 300 enzyme reactions in the body. It controls cell division, protein synthesis, immune balance, and the ability of your hair follicle to actually make strong keratin. Without enough of it, hair doesn't just fall out faster, it grows back weaker, finer, and shorter. The surprising part is this: you can have normal blood work and still be functionally deficient in this nutrient. That's why so many people are told everything looks fine, yet their hair tells a very different story. As we age, absorption of this nutrient drops. Stomach acid decreases, gut health declines, and certain medications block its uptake. Stress burns through it rapidly. Even high-protein diets can increase your need for it. So by the time hair loss shows up, the deficiency has often been there for years. Now let's talk about what this nutrient actually does inside the hair follicle. Hair growth happens in cycles. There's a growth phase, a transition phase, and a resting phase. This nutrient is essential for keeping hair in the growth phase longer. When levels fall, hair follicles shift prematurely into the resting phase. That means more shedding and slower regrowth. It also plays a major role in the oil glands connected to each hair follicle. When those glands malfunction, the scalp environment becomes unhealthy. The hair shaft dries out, breaks more easily, and inflammation increases around the follicle. Over time, that inflammation shrinks the follicle itself. Another key role of this nutrient is oxygen delivery. Hair follicles are extremely sensitive to low oxygen. When this nutrient is low, blood flow efficiency drops at the microscopic level. The follicle doesn't get the signal or the fuel it needs to grow thick hair. Here's where age really matters. Younger people can sometimes get away with borderline levels. Their bodies compensate, but as you get older, that margin disappears. The follicle becomes less forgiving. That's why hair loss often accelerates in your 30 seconds, 40 seconds, and beyond, even if hormones haven't dramatically changed. Now let's clear up an important myth. Taking random hair supplements doesn't fix this problem. Many formulas contain tiny amounts of this nutrient, often in poorly absorbed forms, so people think they're covered, but the follicle is still starving. Food sources matter, but not all sources are equal. Animal-based foods tend to provide more bioavailable forms of this nutrient. Shellfish, red meat, eggs, and certain dairy products are especially rich. Plant sources contain it too, but absorption is often blocked by compounds that bind minerals in the gut. That means someone eating healthy can still be deficient without realizing it. Stress is another huge factor. Chronic stress pulls this nutrient away from hair and sends it towards survival functions. Your body will always choose survival over hair growth. So even if intake looks decent on paper, stress can quietly create a functional deficiency right at the follicle level. One of the earliest signs you're low isn't just hair loss. It's slower hair growth, dull texture, more breakage, and a scalp that feels tighter or more sensitive. Many people notice changes in nails and skin at the same time, but they don't connect the dots. What's powerful is this. When this nutrient is restored properly, hair follicles often respond faster than you expect. Shedding slows first. Then hair texture improves. Over time, the growth phase extends again, and hair begins to look fuller. Not because hormones were forced, but because the follicle finally has what it needs to function. This is why focusing only on hormones can completely miss the root cause. Hormones send the signal, but nutrients build the hair without the building material. The signal doesn't matter. If you're dealing with age-related hair thinning, the real question isn't just what are my hormones doing, it's am I giving my hair follicles the nutrient support they quietly lose with age? Once you fix that, hair loss often stops being such a mystery. Most people are told the same story when their hair starts thinning with age. It's hormones, testosterone, DHT, estrogen changes, thyroid issues, so they go down the hormone rabbit hole. Blood tests, hormone blockers, special shampoos, injections, medications, and sometimes there's a little improvement, but for many people, the hair loss just keeps going, slowly, quietly, year after year. That's because in a huge number of cases, age-related hair loss has very little to do with hormones at all. The real driver is a hidden nutrient deficiency that develops over time and quietly starves the hair follicle. I'm Dr. Eric Berg, and once you understand this, the whole hair loss conversation changes. Let's start with something most people don't realize. Hormones do not build hair. Hormones are messengers. They give instructions. But the hair itself is made from physical building materials: proteins, minerals, enzymes, energy. If the building materials aren't there, the message doesn't matter. You can have perfectly balanced hormones on paper and still lose hair if the follicle doesn't have what it needs to function. Hair follicles are some of the most metabolically active structures in the body. They divide rapidly. They require constant protein synthesis. They rely on enzymes firing at the right speed. That makes them extremely sensitive to nutrient shortages. When nutrients are abundant, hair grows thick and strong. When nutrients are marginal, hair is one of the first places the body cuts corners. This is why hair loss often sneaks up on people as they age. It doesn't happen overnight. The deficiency develops slowly. The body compensates at first. Hair growth becomes a little slower. The strands get slightly finer. Shedding increases just a bit. Most people don't notice until the follicle has already been struggling for years. Here's the key point. Aging itself doesn't cause hair loss. Aging increases the likelihood of nutrient deficiencies. That's a massive VE difference. As we get older, stomach acid declines. That alone reduces mineral absorption dramatically. Digestive enzymes decrease. Gut inflammation increases. Many people start taking medications that interfere with nutrient uptake without realizing it. Acid blockers, blood pressure meds, anti-inflammatories, even common pain relievers can reduce absorption of critical minerals needed for hair growth. At the same time, stress increases with age. Chronic stress drains nutrients at a much faster rate. Your body shifts into survival mode, redirecting resources away from non-essential functions like hair growth. From a survival perspective, hair is optional. From your perspective, it's not. So what happens? You can eat the same diet you ate in your 20 seconds and still become deficient in your 30 seconds, 40 seconds, and 50 seconds. The intake might look fine on paper, but absorption and utilization are no longer the same. Now let's address the hormone myth directly. Many people blame testosterone, specifically DHT, for hair loss. But here's what's rarely explained. DHT doesn't randomly destroy healthy hair follicles. It only affects follicles that are already weakened. A strong, well-nourished follicle is far more resistant to hormonal signals that promote miniaturization. Think of it this way. Hormones are like the wind. Nutrients are the strength of the tree. A healthy tree can withstand strong wind. A weak tree snaps. When a follicle is deficient in critical nutrients, hormonal signals that were once harmless suddenly become destructive. This is why two people with similar hormone levels can have completely different hair outcomes. One keeps thick hair into old age. The other thins rapidly. The difference isn't the hormone. It's the nutrient status of the follicle. Another misunderstanding is blood testing. Many people are told their nutrient levels are normal, but blood levels are tightly regulated. The body will pull nutrients from tissues to keep blood values stable. Hair follicles are not prioritized, so you can have normal blood levels while your hair follicles are running on empty. This is what we call a functional deficiency. On paper, everything looks fine. At the tissue level, it's not. Now let's talk about the specific nutrient at the center of this issue. It's a mineral involved in hundreds of enzyme reactions. It's critical for DNA replication, cell division, protein synthesis, immune balance, and inflammation control. Hair follicles rely on it to stay in the growth phase. When this mineral is low, hair follicles exit growth early and enter a resting phase prematurely. That resting phase is where shedding increases. Hair doesn't regrow as quickly. Over time, the follicle shrinks. The hair shaft becomes thinner. Eventually, the follicle may stop producing visible hair altogether. What makes this deficiency so common is that the body doesn't store large reserves of this mineral. Daily intake matters. Absorption matters even more. And unfortunately, modern diets and aging digestive systems work against both. Even people who eat clean diets can be deficient. Certain plant compounds bind this mineral and block absorption. High-grain diets, high-legume diets, and diets heavy in processed foods worsen the problem. Add stress on top of that, and deficiency becomes almost inevitable over time. Another overlooked factor is protein intake. Hair is made primarily of keratin, a protein structure, but protein alone is not enough. Without the right mineral support, the body cannot assemble keratin properly. That's why some people eat plenty of protein but still have weak, brittle hair. This is also why hair loss often comes with other subtle signs. Changes in skin texture, slower wound healing, weaker nails, reduced immune resilience. But hair is usually the most visible signal, so it gets blamed on aging or genetics instead of nutrition. Genetics do play a role, but genetics load the gun. Environment pulls the trigger. Nutrient status is a huge part of that environment. Here's something fascinating. When this nutrient deficiency is corrected, hair follicles often respond before hormones change at all. Shedding slows, new hair growth feels stronger, hair texture improves. That tells us something very important. The follicle wasn't dead, it was undernourished. This is why age-related hair loss can sometimes stabilize or even partially reverse when the right nutrient is restored. Not because you fought hormones, but because you removed the bottleneck that was limiting growth. Another reason this gets missed is the supplement industry itself. Many hair supplements include this mineral, but often in very small doses or poorly absorbed forms. So people think they're addressing the issue, but the follicle still isn't getting enough usable material. Food sources are better, but only if digestion is working properly. Animal-based sources tend to be more bioavailable. Shellfish, red meat, eggs, and certain dairy products provide forms the body can actually use. But again, absorption declines with age, so intake alone isn't always enough. What's important to understand is that this deficiency doesn't cause sudden hair loss. It causes gradual hair miniaturization. That's why people often say, "My hair didn't fall out, it just got thinner." That's the hallmark of nutrient-driven hair loss. Hormone-driven hair loss tends to be more pattern-based and aggressive. Nutrient-driven hair loss is diffuse, slow, and progressive. It affects overall density and quality, and it often starts years before someone realizes there's a problem. This also explains why hormone treatments sometimes fail. You can suppress hormones, but if the follicle is still deficient, you're not fixing the root cause. In some cases, suppressing hormones without fixing nutrition can make things worse by reducing growth signals without improving building capacity. The smarter approach is to strengthen the follicle first. Give it the raw materials it needs. Make it resilient again. Then hormonal fluctuations have far less impact. Aging doesn't mean your hair is doomed, but aging without addressing nutrient absorption almost guarantees problems. Hair follicles don't suddenly stop working because of birthdays. They slow down because the supply chain breaks down. Once you see hair loss through this lens, it becomes less mysterious and far more manageable. Instead of fighting hormones, you support the biology of the follicle itself. And when the follicle is supported, hair loss often stops being the inevitable part of aging people were told to accept. One of the most frustrating things about age-related hair loss is that it feels like it comes out of nowhere. You didn't suddenly change your diet. You didn't suddenly become healthy. Yet your hair starts thinning, shedding increases, and growth slows down. What's really happening behind the scenes is not a sudden problem, but a slow breakdown in absorption, combined with rising stress and the unintended effects of medications. Together, these factors quietly starve hair follicles over time. I'm Dr. Eric Berg, and this is one of the most overlooked reasons people lose hair as they age. Let's start with absorption, because this is where the problem usually begins. When you're younger, your digestive system is strong. You produce plenty of stomach acid. Digestive enzymes are robust. Minerals and proteins are broken down efficiently and absorbed without much effort. Hair follicles get a steady supply of what they need. As you age, stomach acid naturally declines. This is incredibly important because stomach acid is not just for digestion. It's a gatekeeper for mineral absorption. Without enough acid, minerals don't fully separate from food. They pass through the digestive tract withaut ever being absorbed. You can eat nutrient-rich foods and still become deficient simply because your body can't access what's there. Low stomach acid also increases gut inflammation. Food sits longer in the stomach. Bacteria grow where they shouldn't. The gut lining becomes irritated. That inflammation further blocks absorption, especially of key minerals needed for hair growth. This creates a vicious cycle. Poor digestion leads to deficiencies, and deficiencies weaken digestion even more. On top of that, digestive enzyme production drops with age. Enzymes are what break proteins into amino acids. Hair is built from amino acids, but if protein isn't properly broken down, those building blocks never reach the follicle. This is why many people increase protein intake and see no improvement in hair quality. The issue isn't intake, it's digestion and absorption. Now let's layer in modern lifestyle stress. Chronic stress is one of the fastest ways to drain nutrients from the body. Stress hormones shift your metabolism into survival mode. Blood flow is redirected away from the scalp toward vital organs. Nutrients are pulled from storage tissues and used to manage inflammation, blood sugar, and nervous system demands. Your body does not care about hair when it's under stress. Hair growth is considered non-essential. So even mild long-term stress can create a nutrient shortage at the follicle level, even if overall intake seems adequate. What makes this worse is that stress doesn't just increase nutrient demand, it also damages the gut. Stress reduces stomach acid even further. It disrupts gut bacteria. It increases intestinal permeability. All of this reduces absorption at the same time demand is going up. That's a perfect storm for hair follicles. Now let's talk about medications, because this is where many people unknowingly sabotage their hair health. Some of the most commonly prescribed and over-the-counter medications interfere with nutrient absorption or utilization. Acid-blocking medications are a major example. These drugs reduce stomach acid even more. While they may temporarily reduce symptoms, they also block the absorption of critical minerals required for hair growth. Long-term use is strongly associated with mineral deficiencies that directly affect hair follicles. Blood pressure medications can alter mineral balance and reduce circulation to the scalp. Anti-inflammatory medications can damage the gut lining over time, reducing absorption efficiency. Certain antibiotics disrupt gut bacteria, which play a major role in nutrient processing and absorption. Even supplements can interfere. Excessive intake of one mineral can block absorption of another. This is why people sometimes take supplements and see worsening hair loss. The balance matters, not just the dose. Another overlooked issue is that as people age, they often eat less variety. Appetite changes, digestion feels heavier. People stick to safe foods. That reduces nutrient diversity and increases the risk of subtle deficiencies that accumulate over time. Let's connect this back to hair follicles. Hair follicles don't store nutrients, they rely on a constant supply from the bloodstream. When absorption declines, the follicle feels it quickly, but instead of shutting down immediately, it adapts. Growth slows, the hair shaft becomes thinner, the growth phase shortens. This adaptive response allows survival, but it comes at the cost of hair density. This is why hair loss from nutrient starvation is slow and progressive. It doesn't shock the system, it quietly erodes hair quality year after year. People often say their hair feels weaker, doesn't grow past a certain length, or breaks more easily. These are classic signs of inadequate nutrient delivery. Another factor that worsens this problem is insulin resistance, which becomes more common with age. Elevated insulin disrupts mineral transport into cells. Even if minerals are present in the blood, insulin resistance prevents them from entering the follicle efficiently. T creates a functional deficiency at the cellular level. Sleep also plays a role. Poor sleep increases stress hormones and reduces tissue repair. Hair follicles regenerate during deep sleep. When sleep quality declines, nutrient utilization drops and inflammation increases around the follicle. This further weakens hair growth. Now consider how all of this compounds over time. Slightly lower stomach acid, slightly higher stress, one or two medications, slightly poorer sleep. None of these alone seem dramatic. Together, they slowly choke off nutrient supply to the follicle. This is why people often say, "I didn't change anything, but my hair did." In reality, many small changes added up over years. What's critical to understand is that this type of hair loss is not permanent. In the early stages, the follicle is not dead, it's underfed. When nutrient delivery improves, follicles often respond surprisingly well. One of the first changes people notice when absorption improves is reduced shedding. Hair fall slows, then texture improves. Hair feels thicker and stronger. Over time, the growth phase extends again. This tells us the follicle was simply waiting for adequate support. This is also why topical solutions alone rarely work long term. You can stimulate the scalp, but if the internal supply chain is broken, results will be limited. Hair is grown from the inside out. Another common mistake is blaming genetics without addressing absorption. Genetics influence sensitivity, but they don't override basic biology. Even genetically sensitive follicles need nutrients to miniaturize. Without the deficiency, progression is much slower. The most dangerous part of this problem is that it's invisible on standard tests. Blood work often looks normal. Doctors say everything is fine. Meanwhile, hair continues to thin. That disconnect causes people to lose hope or chase aggressive treatments that don't address the root cause. Understanding this shifts the entire strategy. Instead of asking, "What can I put on my scalp?" the better question becomes, "What's blocking nutrient delivery to my follicles?" Age-related hair loss is rarely about one big thing going wrong. It's about many small systems breaking down together. Digestion weakens, stress rises, medications interfere, sleep suffers. Over time, hair follicles pay the price. When you restore absorption, manage stress, and reduce nutrient interference, you're not forcing hair to grow. You're removing the obstacles that were preventing it from growing in the first place. That's why addressing declining absorption, chronic stress, and medication effects is not optional if you want to stop age-related hair loss. It's foundational. Without fixing the supply chain, nothing else works consistently. Once you understand that your hair follicles aren't failing you, but rather being deprived over time, the solution becomes much clearer. Support digestion, reduce stress load, be aware of what interferes with absorption. Do that, and hair loss often slows, stabilizes, and in many cases begins to reverse its course naturally. One of the most hopeful but least talked about truths in age-related hair loss is this: when you restore the right nutrient, hair follicles often wake back up. Not overnight, not magically, but steadily and predictably. This is because hair loss caused by nutrient deficiency is not the same as hair loss caused by irreversible follicle damage. Many people, the follicles are not dead, they are paused. And when the growth phase is extended again, shedding reduces and density begins to return. I'm Dr. Berg. And this is where the conversation around hair loss needs to shift from fear to understanding. Hair growth follows a very precise biological rhythm. There is a growth phase where the hair actively lengthens. There is a brief transition phase. And then there is a resting phase where the hair eventually sheds. Healthy hair spends most of its time in the growth phase. When the body is undernourished at the follicle level, that balance changes. The growth phase shortens. More hairs enter the resting phase at the same time. That's when people notice excessive shedding and thinning. The key nutrient we were talking about plays a direct role in keeping hair follicles in the growth phase. It is required for DNA replication, cell division, and protein synthesis. Hair matrix cells divide rapidly, and without sufficient support, they slow down. This doesn't cause immediate baldness, it causes weaker output. The hair grows thinner, slower, and for a shorter duration before shedding. What's powerful is that this process is reversible in many cases. When the nutrient is restored to adequate levels and actually reaches the follicle, the biological signals shift. The follicle re-enters the growth phase more easily. The duration of that phase increases. Over time, the cumulative effect is thicker, denser hair. The first change people often notice is a reduction in daily shedding. This is an important signal. It means fewer follicles are entering the resting phase prematurely. Hair may still look thin at first, but the loss is slowing. That's the foundation for regrowth. Next, hair texture begins to improve. Strands feel stronger, breakage decreases, hair holds length better. This happens because keratin production becomes more efficient when the nutrient supply is restored. The hair shaft itself becomes structurally sound again. Another important effect is on the scalp environment. This nutrient helps regulate oil gland function and immune balance around the follicle. When levels are low, the scalp often becomes inflamed or imbalanced. That inflammation silently damages follicles over time. Restoring the nutrient calms the scalp, improves barrier function, and reduces microscopic inflammation that interferes with growth. Blood flow also improves at the microvascular level. Hair follicles rely on tiny capillaries for oxygen and nutrient delivery. This nutrient supports proper circulation and oxygen utilization. Better oxygen delivery means better energy production inside the follicle. Hair growth is an energy-intensive process, and without adequate energy, follicles stay dormant. One of the most misunderstood aspects of hair regrowth is timing. Hair does not respond instantly. Follicles operate on cycles. When you restore a missing nutrient, the follicle must complete its current cycle before fully benefiting. That's why patience is critical. Many people quit too early because they expect immediate visual change. Typically, the first 1 to 2 months show reduced shedding. Around 3 to 4 months, new growth becomes noticeable. By 6 months, density and thickness improvements are more apparent. This timeline reflects biology, not marketing promises. Another reason restoring this nutrient works so well is that it strengthens follicles against hormonal stress. Hormones do not disappear with age, but when follicles are well nourished, they become more resilient. Hormonal signals that once caused miniaturization lose much of their impact. This shifts the balance in favor of growth. It's also important to understand that restoring the nutrient doesn't just help existing hair. It helps preserve future hair. By maintaining follicles in the growth phase longer, you reduce the likelihood of permanent miniaturization over time. This is prevention as much as it is recovery. People often ask why this nutrient isn't emphasized more in mainstream hair loss treatments. The reason is simple. It doesn't fit the quick fix model. It requires addressing absorption, diet, stress, and balance. There's no instant payoff, but biologically it makes perfect sense. Another fascinating aspect is how this nutrient interacts with protein. Hair is mostly protein, but protein cannot be assembled correctly without proper enzymatic support. When this nutrient is restored, protein utilization improves. That means the same diet suddenly produces better hair outcomes. There's also a psychological benefit to this approach. Instead of fighting your body, you support it. You stop viewing hair loss as inevitable or genetic doom and start seeing it as a signal. That mindset shift alone reduces stress, which further supports hair growth. One important caution is balance. More is not always better. Restoring this nutrient should be done thoughtfully. Excessive intake can interfere with other minerals. That's why quality, form, and balance matter. The goal is adequacy, not overload. Food sources play a critical role. Bioavailable sources support long-term stability. When digestion is improved and the right foods are emphasized, hair follicles receive a steady supply instead of spikes and crashes. Consistency is what follicles respond to best. Another key point is that hair regrowth is not uniform. Some areas respond faster than others. Areas with less miniaturization recover more easily. This is normal and should not be discouraging. It reflects the degree of follicle stress that existed before restoration. This approach also benefits skin and nails, which often improve alongside hair. That's another sign you're addressing a foundational issue, not just a cosmetic one. The body starts reallocating resources back to growth and repair instead of survival. Perhaps the most important takeaway is this: age-related hair loss is not always a one-way street. When the underlying nutrient deficiency is corrected, the biology of hair growth often reasserts itself. Not perfectly, not identically to youth, but meaningfully. People are often surprised that something so basic can have such a profound effect. That's because modern health conversations focus on signals instead of supplies. Hormones are signals. Nutrients are supplies. You cannot build without supplies. Restoring the right nutrient does not force hair to grow. It allows hair to grow. That distinction matters. Forced growth often fails. Supported growth tends to last. When hair follicles receive consistent nourishment, reduced inflammation, better oxygen, and improved protein synthesis, they do what they were designed to do. They grow hair. This is why the final piece of stopping age-related hair loss isn't chasing new treatments or stronger interventions. It's returning to biological basics and respecting the needs of the follicle. Once you restore what time, stress, and absorption quietly took away, hair loss often slows, stabilizes, and in many cases begins to reverse. And that's not wishful thinking. That's physiology working as intended again.